Welcome to our eye video. For this video I'll be using an Arabian medallion sculpted by Karen Giesbrecht. I wanted to use this medallion since the eye is fairly large. I felt it would help folks see a little bit better what I was doing. I'll be using a size 20/0 liner brush for this particular video. I like to start my eyes first by doing the eye whites. Eye whites can also be called sclera. One of the colors I use in the eye whites is called Flesh Tone, and it's by Delta Ceramco. It's a bit between a pink and a peach color. It's also a great color when you're working with the pinking on the muzzles and in the pasterns of the legs as well. Then I've got a color called Nutmeg Brown by Plaid. That's what I'm going to use for the little spotting within the sclera. Bar number would work well for that too. You just want a nice dark brown, and of course some white as well. I'm going to start by mixing some white in with my flesh tone just to give me a pale pink color. Dilute it with water a little bit. You don't want it so thin like if you were doing white markings, but it still needs to be somewhat smooth when you're working with it. I'm going to go in with my small brush and paint in some eye whites. I like to go a bit further into the eye than what would normally show. Most of it's going to be covered with the iris color anyway, so you can just stick to that little outer rim if you'd like. Now you can change the look of the horse depending on these eye whites. I like to give a small amount of rim in the front on almost all of mine. If I want a really soft, kind eye, I won't do it as much, or I won't do it at all. Years ago there was an article in a horse magazine that stated whatever direction the ear pointed to was where that eye was looking. So if one ear was back, the horse was looking back with that eye, and so on and so forth. That's not entirely true, or rather it's not true 100% of the time. But in the cases with models, it can totally change the look of the horse if you want to apply those rules based on which direction the individual ear is in, or the emotion of the horse. If the horse is excited or looks somewhat fearful, you can put a lot of eye white in the front of that eye, and that'll really make the whole look come together. Now, since I've got quite a bit of eye to work with here, I'm going to go ahead and add in a little tear duct in the corner. Now for this, you can use just a little spot of straight flesh tone color. Fairly easy to do with a traditional or something this large, but once you go smaller than that, it's going to be hard to even notice. I'll add my drop right here. And this actually came over the area where I wanted it in, so I'm going to take a pointed Q-tip and go in there and get that out. It's going to soak that up just like a sponge. See there? That's what happens when you thin your acrylics too much. They want to run down in areas you don't want them in. So what I'll do is I'll tap my brush on a paper towel and kind of soak up that excess water out of there, and try again with the flesh tone. Let's see, it's not wanting to run as badly as it was when it was thin too much. Then I can just take my pointed Q-tip and clean around those edges. If your acrylics aren't thin, the Q-tip won't suck them up as much, but it'll just at least wipe them away. If you want to get the end of that Q-tip just a little bit damp to help you wipe that away, that'll help too. And I'm going to let this first coat dry, and then we'll move on to the next coat. Acrylics typically dry rather quickly, so it won't take long for this to be dry. So I'm ready to do the second coat of white and flesh tone mix. If you just barely thin these acrylics down, it shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 coats to get these solid. If it's a little gloppy, don't worry about it. The gloss you'll use on them later will smooth that out. You don't want them real sloppy or anything, but a little unevenness can be fixed with the gloss. So I'll go in and do the same area as I did before, but I'll avoid that little corner where I put that tear duct in. If you mess it up, it's no big deal, just do it over again. Now while this acrylic is still somewhat wet, I want to go in with my Nutmeg Brown and just kind of dot the eye right along that rim. Some horses won't have these little specks in the eye white area. Just go off reference photo or whatever your personal preference is. It's going to look like little dots when I'm done. So I'll go back in with my flesh and white mix, and I'll just blot those little brown dots with the flesh mix, just to get the little areas of brown really small and sporadic. I'll go back and forth with the brown and the flesh mix until I get those how I want them. I just want them right there in the rim, not all the way through this pink area I've painted. Most of that's going to be covered with iris anyway, so I can avoid that area. Now, if you don't want to be rushing while you do your eyes and you want a little bit extended dry time, you can use acrylic retarder, and that will lengthen the dry time on your acrylics. That way you can blend them a little bit better and you can work with them a little bit longer than you usually could. And here's what my eye white looks like now. The next thing we'll go over is the black area that creates the outer rim of that eyeball. And this is just plain old black acrylics. Any brand will do. I like to go ahead and get the shape of the iris in with all black, since I like to leave a thin little area of black around the edge of the eye. Now as I move on through doing this eye, you can actually see, if I was to leave that rim at the top of that eye, how skittish this horse would look and fired up. I like to work from the back of the eye towards the front along that top rim and just slowly shrink that eye white area. Because sometimes I might only want a little bit of eye white, but as I begin painting the eye itself and seeing how it looks with a little bit extra, I might like that look better. The main thing with this black rim is just make sure you have a really good shape to it. Clean up any little edges you might have that get onto the rim of the eye. And also where it goes into the eye white area, I want it to be extremely smooth and the correct shape. I don't want any feathered edges or any edges of that black to look uneven or jagged. Now I've got this eyeball pretty much where I want it, and I'll move forward with my iris.